everyone. We're going to do our top 10s of the year.
Hello, everybody. Yeah.
Hello.
Shall we start off with how we chose them?
Yeah.
So I looked at my top, like my 5-star reads, and then just picked things that have stayed with me for the year, and it's gone a bit crazy this year. So perennial favourites of mine aren't in my top 10, but only because I could only have 10. If I could have more than 10, they would be there. So I've read some really good reads this year, and I think what's come to the fore for me is that I really like kind of quirky stories and interesting protagonists, and my top 10 is very full of quirky stories and interesting protagonists. What about you guys?
I can tell you that the way I picked my top 10 didn't at all look back on anything from this year. I literally sat down and wrote 10 books off the top of my head. It's the same thing I did last year. And then I went back through and checked if I'd missed anything. And while there are a lot of great books that could have made the list, the top 10, same as last year, stood out and stuck with me.
Well,
Alex.
This year, only one author has made the list from last year. So it's quite interesting, really, because with being involved with Bloody Scotland and Theakston's as well, I've had to do a lot of organising for deciding what books I was going to focus on. But deciding on the top 10 wasn't easy at all. I wish I did the 5 stars like Caroline, but I just find that too complicated and too narrow a scheduling system. So deciding is just very difficult. And by the time I come up with it, one of the books that's in the top 10 was actually a special mention last year. So you might have already heard one of them already on last year's recording.
I've definitely got some authors from last year, just off the top of my head. I can't think how many.
Yeah, because one of them was read in December last year after we'd already recorded the books of the year. So
yeah,
that's
so it counts.
I think mine might be completely new.
Yeah.
I didn't got anyone from last year.
I mean, I think there's about over 200 books, I think, by the time we're done.
Let's see if we all agree again or have completely different lists, which will be exciting. I know the answers to this because I've got everybody's list.
I think I know the answer, but we'll see.
So shall we start with number 10 from all of us? Alex, do you want to go first with your number 10?
I've got to remember what it is. I've only just looked them up. Yeah.
Want me to give you a reminder?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Oh, they're doing it.
They're doing it. It's fine.
So your number 10 was Beast by Matt Weslowski.
Yeah. Beast by Matt Weslowski was an interesting read because this year I read all of Matt Weslowski's books in preparation for our Halloween event. So it was a case of deciding which one of them, although they were all good, was going to make the list. And Beast was the vampire one, which was the 4th one in his series, which was around video blogging. And because it was so different from all his others, it just stuck out. Matt Weslowski's podcast way of writing also appears again in the list later for somebody else, because podcasts have appeared more than once in this year's list. And I'll just leave it at that.
Right. I'm not sure. Number 10.
Susan Hanley, Paid in Blood. I was lucky enough to read an arc of this, and Matt Fisher, who is the detective, he was a pro footballer and then was injured, so became a police officer. And then from there, he was blinded in an acid attack. And this book is the journey after that. So it's showing what happens as he navigates his way back into the police force. He's very stubborn. You know, he really wants to be in control himself, but obviously being blind, he needs some support. So he's got a guide dog called Luna. He's got Beth Nightingale, who is kind of assigned to work alongside him, but really proves her worth. You know, he does let her in. It takes a while, but he lets her in. And there's a murder, and it's trying to solve the murder of this celebrity and doing all of that whilst not being able to see anything and having to rely on other senses to really understand how to unpick it all, basically, and how to solve it.
That's great.
Intriguing, that.
It's absolutely brilliant. It's so well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's done a cracking job with it. The research that has gone into it, just to make sure that everything's believable. You know, you do believe that this really could happen because of the way that Sue's done it.
I really like Susan's books.
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and read that one. I picked Inheritance Games as my number 10 by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. It's a YA crime book set in America. It's about a young girl who lives with like her stepsister. She wants to sort of do well, but she's very sort of poor. She sometimes lives in a car because her stepsister's boyfriend isn't very nice. And then out of the blue, she goes to school and there's these people waiting for her and she thinks she's in trouble. And they basically tell her that she's mentioned in this person's will and the person's like a billionaire.
No?
And she inherits everything if she lives in his house with his family for like a year.
Oh, that sounds
okay. That's got me. That's hooked me.
And it's fascinating because there's all these like clues hidden and things, and she's trying to work out why she's even in there because she doesn't even know who this guy is. And obviously, like none of the family want her there because they're being disinherited. So it's just like shenanigans ensue, and it's excellent. I read it and bought the second one as I was reading it.
Love it when that happens.
Yeah.
It's always good, isn't it? Mine gets sort of progressively a little bit more weird from here, so I'm going to that one's quite normal. Right, so number 9. Do you want to start going again, Alex, with number 9?
Apologies if you could remind me again. I'll remember when I get to about number 6, but
okay, number 9 was Our Little Cruelties by Liz Nugent.
Number 9, Liz Nugent's Our Little Cruelties was one of the long listed books for this year's Theakstons, and I chose it because it was a really good audiobook. It had 3 separate narrators for the points of view of the brothers in the book, and because it jumped around from different periods, it was at times hard to follow, but when she'd drawn it together, it really did make a lot of sense. And starting at a funeral and not knowing which of the brothers is in the casket is a great way to start the book. And then you find out what happens to the brothers throughout the decades, and you find out who's in the casket.
So are they all telling the same story from their own points of view?
They're all going back through their lives and saying it ends up by telling you who's in the casket.
Okay, I like the sound of that one.
Yeah, it does sound. I've heard people talking about it in the group. I think it does sound like it's really good.
Yeah, it was very different, and it really did work well with the 3 different narrators in the audiobook.
Yeah, multiple narrators can be really good, can't they?
Yeah.
Sam, number 9.
Oh, Silenced by Jenny Enser. I only read this, is it a week ago? It's really recently, just for an interview, and it's quite brutal throughout, but not in the details. You know what's happened, but but Jenny leaves you kind of filling in the gaps of some of the more horrific parts. So a 15-year-old girl is on her way home from school and she's stabbed through the heart. Very intentional, knife blade, but then you have to wonder, was she the real target or was she mistaken identity? And that isn't even the start of the carnage that Jenny weaves through this book. There are gangs, there is so much going on. It's quite a long book. It's I'm sure it's just over 500 pages. It's really long, but the amount that is in this story, the friendships, the rivalries, the relationships, the things that are seen to be normal by these characters. And there were times when I was reading it and I was thinking, no, you idiot, don't do that. Why are you doing that? And it's people being drawn into these situations that by the time they realise they're in them, it's too late. You can see as the reader what they're doing, but just and I know Jenny went did a lot of research as well. She talked to actual gang members. She spoke to lots and lots of people. She spoke to teachers who were worried about students, and all of this research has made the book so rich. It's a brilliant book. I'd highly recommend it. And even if you're a bit squeamish but you fancy something dark, she gets the line just right.
Oh,
it's really good.
I love the squeaminess, I must admit. Yeah.
That does sound good. My number 9 is Beasters by Paru. Beasters.
Okay.
By Paru Itagaki. I pronounced that horribly. I've set myself a real challenge this year with people for that. It's a manga. It's also crime. So it follows, it's set in high school, and it follows the lead character dealing with the death of one of his classmates, who's been devoured because they're all animals.
Okay.
Okay, that sounds a bit strange, but it's manga.
The lead character's a grey wolf, and it focuses on this, them trying to work out what's happened to their sort of fellow member who was an alpaca who was eaten, and they're trying to solve that crime. But then there's also this kind of sweet little love triangle going on between the grey wolf, who's the main character, the leader of the drama club, who's this red deer, and this girl that they both kind of love, who's a dwarf rabbit.
Okay, that's a little.
But
yeah, it's manga, isn't it?
Yeah, I've summed it up as Zootopia, but thought-provoking.
Yeah.
It's absolutely excellent, and I discovered it this year, and I've read all of the books that are out.
Well, if that's at your number 9, and you said they get stranger on the way up, I'm not
they do get strange. That's the only, I think it's the only comic that I've got this year on my top 10. So I do have another one as an honourable mention.
Yeah, I think you had a couple last year, didn't you?
Possibly. I do like to read comics, and the one I've got as an honourable mention is a bit like Sam. It's a really late edition. It's something I've discovered recently. So your number 8, Alex, was The Dentist by Tim Sullivan.
Oh, yes. The Dentist by Tim Sullivan is very interesting because Sam's number 10 is about a blind person in the police, whereas this one is about an autistic policeman who is struggling to cope with his colleagues and the way that they treat him in the past, but now he's an established policeman, and a cold case affects a new one, and it's just really good at explaining how an autistic person would deal with a police interview, and the way that Tim highlights all the clues, and the way that the detective brings out all the nuances of the mystery was really good, and because it covered a homeless person as well, it allowed for some really good themes to be covered, and also homelessness also appears later in my list as well. So there seems to be a bit of a theme.
I'm
this
just
year.
looking for. I read a series of books, or a few series of books that sound very similar, that with an autistic detective called Jonathan Roper, that I really enjoyed. They're by Michael Lee,
Okay, I've not.
and he has a very profoundly autistic son that he used
Yeah,
like inspiration to draw on writing his detective.
Mm.
I just think it's a whole new flavour to the way that crime and mysteries are brought into it. I think it just brings it into a whole new level.
Sam, your number 8?
Is Remember Me, and it's by Amanda Rigby, but that's Sally Rigby and Amanda Ashby co-writing. So they're both prolific authors in their own right, and then this is their first book together. So I had the pleasure of interviewing them a few weeks ago, and there was so much fun, absolutely so much fun. This book, I'd read half of it before the interview, and then once we were done, I went and picked it back up and carried on reading, and that's what I did for the rest of the night. Basically, there's a couple called Paul and Jenna who have been together a while. They're moving into a new house, they're having a baby, everything's perfect, which is when they pull the rug from under them, obviously. Because what else are you going to do with a happy couple? That's not crime worthy. That doesn't sell anything. So they absolutely destroy poor Paul, who he's being stalked by his ex, but how can that be possible? Because he's sure he killed her.
Oh,
So I mean, it's a good hook. If that one little bit doesn't interest you, then you're in the wrong group. So it's the unraveling of it. It's how is Nicole stalking them? Is it Nicole? Did he really kill her? He can't remember the whole thing that happened. He isn't quite sure. So not only is he trying to figure out if it is Nicole, he's trying to stop his life from unraveling, and he feels like he's going insane. And it is all obviously laid out in front of us by these very skilled women who I don't know how they could work together on a book, but it works beautifully. So, and that's all I'm going to tell you, because if I say anything else, I am absolutely going to spoil it.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, my number 8 is one of my students at school shut up and take my money authors.
Oh, yeah.
So she said that. They said that, and I had to buy the book, obviously, because if they say it, shut up and take my money author, you have to go and investigate
absolutely.
it. And then I interviewed this author as part of Spookfest because I absolutely loved the book, and it's called Bath Street by AJ Hartley. And it's a YA crime, and a little bit like your number 9, I think, Alex. It opens with, in a really unusual way, so it opens with the death of the lead character.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember watching the interview, and it really intrigued me, actually, because it's
So then he's a ghost, and he has to kind of work out both what's happened to him to make him a ghost, and then kind of solve what's happening to these other ghosts that he's met as well. And it is just so accomplished as a novel, because you think once you've started with the character dying, like, where do you go from there? But it's really well done. It is incredibly spooky. It's incredibly, I wouldn't have read it as a child. Like, it would have been too creepy.
Yeah.
It was on the edge. Like, I was reading it going, this is really creepy. But it's really, really, really good. And the author is just such a nice guy as well, from interviewing him, but it couldn't be anywhere other than on my top 10 list. So, number 7. Do you want me to remind you, Alex, of your number 7?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Daughters of Night by Laura Shepherd Robinson.
Laura Shepherd Robinson, Daughters of Night. This is her second one, and it's way back in January when I interviewed her. So it tells you how long this book stuck with me, because with the number of books that we three of us read all year, you can imagine it's got to have done really well to stick with you for that long.
Yeah.
Her first book was about the slave ships, and this one is about prostitution in the 1600s, I think it is. It was just very, very different as a kind of crime novel, because you've got all sorts of things like how complicated it is as a woman to make a living, and then you've got society and the way that deals with it. You've got the art and culture, and you've also got gin and pineapples, rather strangely as well.
Okay.
Yeah, pineapples are a sign of wealth in that period because they take so long to grow in hot house.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
How many books have you read this year, Alex?
It's got to be at least 200 if I can, because it's around between 2 and 3 a week. So, yeah, between 150 and 200, I think. So, a lot.
You must be about the same, Sam.
Honestly, I haven't got a clue. I've not done kind of Goodreads or anything, so I set myself a target at the beginning of the year, but I really don't know how many books I've read. I know it's a lot. I've just no clue how many. I couldn't even guess off the top of my head.
I mean, I've read 5 since we stopped compiling the list, so that tells you everything, doesn't it?
I've done 250 according to my Goodreads, but I've probably missed stuff off. So, Sam, your number 7
is Look What You Made Me Do by Nikki Smith. Another book that I was just gripped in a different way by. So Jo and Caroline are sisters, and both have a completely wrong idea about each other's lives. You know, they think they've got an understanding, but this is a book of family secrets and rivalries and jealousy and things just that these sisters assume a certain thing about each other, but when it all unravels, they really learn who each other are. There's just so much that happens in it, and fighting over certain things and not understanding the reason that each other has for wanting these things that they're chasing. I find with every one of our books, it's really difficult to say too much without giving something away. But yeah, Nikki writes brilliant characters, and it's always draws you in, always leaves you with questions. Doesn't leave you with questions. Always really makes you think and wonder what is going to happen, and is what you're thinking the way it's going, and never quite being sure until you actually know. Do you know what I mean? You're never really
Yeah.
sure what is happening or which direction it's going to go until something tells you the direction. So yeah, another really exciting book.
To me, that's the sign of a good book, though. If you're a reviewer and you can't sum it up in a quick sentence without giving anything away, because it means that the audience has got to, if you it's lyrical about it enough for somebody else to pick it up and they go, I like that as well, and then it starts to domino throughout the group or wherever you wherever you put your review, and it's a good sign of a good book if it does that. Yeah.
Very true. My number 7 is a book that I read right at the beginning of the year. I got it for Christmas last year from my dad. And it's The Mermaid and the Bear by Eilish Sinclair. And it's historical I don't really know what genre it would be in. Like historical fiction about a
Yeah.
young girl who kind of leaves her home to avoid a forced marriage. She heads up to Scotland because of all these tales and things she said, and also because it's like the furthest from where she lives. So she's hoping no one will chase her that far. And she ends up working at this laird's castle, and obviously she goes and pretends to be a servant, but she knows a bit more than she should because she isn't of that class, and so she sort of gets slightly better jobs and things as she goes in it. It's sort of set at the height of Scottish witch trials, and that comes in as part of it, and it's just, I don't know, it's a beautiful kind of atmospheric read, and I still think about it, even though I read it like the very beginning of the year.
That's always a good sign. And you just can't get it out your head.
Yeah.
Definitely. I've got her second book on my Kindle to read. Or another one where I've gone and bought more because of the book. Which is always a sign, isn't it? So number 6.
Number 6.
Do you want me to tell you your number 6, or do you remember that one?
I can, if you can tell us that one, I can remember the top 5. Is the
You're doing better than I can. I don't know any of them off the top of my head. I've got a list in front of me.
Yeah, number 6 I have as well. Number 6 is True Crime Stories by Joseph Knox.
Oh, you really liked this one, Alex.
I loved it. Yeah. It's just such a good book, really. I mean, it's another podcast one, and it was. I'm trying to remember how many narrators it was. I think it's about 6 or 7 during the audiobook.
Wow.
And even Joseph Knox read his own part, because the book was based around a fictional podcast. He was podcasting with somebody else about a student death in somewhere near Manchester, I think it was. Might have the city wrong, but makes no difference to the plot. Just 2 sisters go off to uni, and one goes missing, and it's trying to work out what happened to the sister, who was responsible for it, and which one of the students and her parents are the most awkward people you can imagine. It was a really good way of showing how you can build up different characters in the same kind of location, because you don't want to make them all sound the same as students. And it meant a lot to me because I was struggling to do that in my own book, which I'm currently writing at the moment. And that was a lesson in making sure that your characters are different enough to care about it. And because I'd interviewed Joseph Knox with his first book, Sirens, which is mentioned in this novel, because he meets the fictional woman at a book signing for that novel, and because we were able to discuss both the books during the interview, it's just stuck in my head, really. Yeah.
I think podcasts are a really interesting way of telling a story as well, aren't they? I read one by John Richter that was told by someone who was like running a true crime podcast, and they'd gone back to this cold case.
Yeah.
They're trying to solve it. And it's just so unusual, like a way of telling the story, that is really interesting.
Yeah. You just don't know where they're going to go, because the podcast can be told in so many different ways as well.
Yeah. Sam, your number 6?
Dead Ground by M.W. Craven. Now, only Mike Craven, we'd expect, pop-up food vans, maybe a pop-up bookstore, bookshop. No, Mike's got a pop-up brothel, and somebody's murdered in it. So that is if that doesn't stick in your mind, I really don't know what will. So basically, there is a trade summit, and the victim of the murder is a former military. So you've got all kinds of people trying to either investigate or hinder to solve this murder. There are country houses involved, there are protesters involved in this story. There's Poe and Tilly, obviously, Tilly, as Mike always says to me when we talk, takes the mickey out of my accent. There is just so much going on, and alongside all of this, Poe is in danger of losing his croft where he lives. There are shady visitors who you're not quite sure who they are. Poe says he's going to walk out when he's trying to find out who these people are who are trying to investigate, but I keep trying to keep who they really are quite secret, and he doesn't fall for it because he's as sharp as Mike is. And there is just so much to love about this story. And after it, I went and bought the other books that I'd missed, because Dead Ground was my first Mike Craven book. So what a place to start.
Yeah, I've read the first one. I love Poe and Tilly, especially the way that the characters are brought. Have you managed to read the first one yet?
Yeah, I've read them all now. Yeah. I've still got the Fluke books, the Avison Flukes to read, but yeah. Are you talking about the puppet show?
I am. Yeah. I thought Poe and Tilly were just brilliant, and I'm definitely going to try and read a few books in the series throughout the following year, because I've decided I'm going to focus on series a lot next year.
I really like in Dead Ground the street performer, Bugger Rumble. Such an excellent new character, isn't it? Only Mike.
So go on, Kaz, what's yours?
My number 6 is Girl King by Mimi Yu.
Okay.
It's a high kind of fantasy book. I don't read a lot of fantasy books, so this is unusual for me from the start. It's a young girl who is kind of training and thinking that she's going to take over from her father, who's the emperor, at this like place in China. So it's sort of set in the historical times. She honestly believes that that's what she's training for, that's what's going to happen. And then she goes to the bit where he steps down, and surprise, surprise, she's not announced as his successor. So then it's like what she's going to do to kind of take her rightful place. There's just enough kind of magic in to make it interesting, but not too much to make it ridiculous. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's absolutely excellent. You know, when you finish a book and you're like, I need to send this to someone else needs to read this, like it's so good. I like packaged it up and sent it to someone else. So I knew like those kind of books, like you must read this.
And what did you think? Have you read it yet?
I don't know. I'm hoping they're going to read it very soon, but they've got it to read, and it's absolutely excellent.
I must admit, I do like fantasy. It's only the length of fantasy books that put me off, because normally they're around 20 hours, and 24 hours takes over a week for me to read. So it's a bit of a challenge and complicated. But I do like magic and all that complication.
It's really good, and there's only 2 in the series, so you wouldn't have to commit to too much time if you read it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. 2 is quite small for a fantasy series, because they're normally in about groups of 3 at least as a minimum, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, I don't often read them. It captured my attention in Waterstones when I was looking, and I was like, this sounds really good. And I've got book 2 to read, but I got a bit sidetracked by author chat books. So maybe now I can go back and read book 2.
Yeah. So halfway point now.
We are halfway.